Welcome to TruthStream. Today we are here with Kerry Cassidy. She is known as the queen of the whistleblowers to many of us. We're very excited to have her. And without further ado, Kerry, welcome to TruthStream. We're honored to have you on our show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go into a plethora of topics, everything ranging from AI, some possible Donald Marshall topics. But you know, Scott's been in this movement a bit longer than I have as far as like digging deep. So I'm going to turn it over to this smiling little person over here.
I'm excited. I'm very excited.
So you go ahead.
Kerry, lots of questions for you, but you know, you recently returned from Egypt, I believe, and I know you know a great deal about Egypt. So I think a really good place to start off might be you know, the whole situation with Aleister Crowley and his wife, or no, not wife, girlfriend at the time, Rose, channeling the Book of the Law while spending the evening in the King's Chamber, something that isn't done anymore. But what can you tell me about what happened there with Aleister Crowley?
Well, I don't know what happened. I know I've read the Book of the Law.
Mhm.
I've read quite a bit of Crowley when I was fairly young. I sort of stumbled on him and some occult literature that was actually in my parents' house. These books that were sort of hidden behind a door in a small bookcase. And I don't know why, but I do know why. But you know what I'm saying? Some of the books were called Alchemy and this and that. And so I think I might have heard his name first there, but there were other places where I heard it as well. And when I grew up, I ended up working at Jet Propulsion Lab, JPL, which is Jack Parsons' lab.
I didn't
And
know.
I was very, I studied that. I studied the occult because I wanted to understand, I guess you might say, the nature of evil and Satanism and all of that in our world. So I don't know. I just I knew enough to want to do that. So I did. And so in terms of the Book of the Law, you know, what I found out in my studies, okay, in terms of the writings of Crowley, that he was a very brilliant man, and that he actually was not all bad, strangely. So I'm sure there's many stories out there of negative stuff and satanic stuff going on there. He wanted to be known as a very negative person. He actually thought that was funny and a joke. He liked being like the devil or the most evil man or whatever kind of thing. But it was a pose as far as I'm concerned. And I think Jack Parsons was more level-headed. I think L. Ron Hubbard was more diabolical, if you really want my real opinion.
I agree.
And L. Ron Hubbard was associated with, I guess, Navy intelligence. Crowley and Parsons, I'm not so sure about Parsons, whether he was really associated with an intelligence agency or not. He was in aerospace. He was a rocket scientist. That was his link up. But Crowley and Crowley was actually his mentor, more than anyone else, I would say. And he was the younger man, Parsons, of course, at the time, and a very beautiful young man, I must say. So just saying, you know, for what it's worth. Crowley being kind of, a big jovial looking kind of jokester kind of person. Now, how much they were Satanists, I don't know, because at the time when I read the literature, God, I was pretty young. So I didn't necessarily, I knew there was dark stuff there, but I wasn't there for that. So I didn't go in that direction, if you can understand. I didn't go memorize spells and try to put spells on people or things like that. What I was interested in studying was the philosophy behind him and what he was trying to say in his literature. And he said some really brilliant, wonderful things, actually, about spiritual seeking that I think, you know, should be more famous than they are. And the Book of the Law was one of those things where it's kind of taking your own, it talks about the will and the importance of the will and doing what you will and all of this. So being a magician or being a witch or being a warlock or all these different things, I don't come from a Christian background per se. I mean, I do, but we didn't have a Bible in the house, for example. My father wouldn't go to church. My mother decided to take us to church when we were, and she was kind of like into psychology. She graduated from Stanford with a degree in psychology. So she was more into analyzing the world from that point of view. So I know this is a long-winded answer, and you can ask me direct questions about Crowley, whatever, but I just want to lay the groundwork here so that people understand where I'm coming from with my answers. And so I also studied the Crowley Tarot in depth, and really I got into it when I was quite young. I was in my early 20s, and the books themselves, I think I came across them even earlier, like when I was even younger. So it was just part and parcel of a whole spiritual journey I did. I got really into Eastern philosophy. I studied Zen, and I studied Buddhism, and I studied, you name it, Taoism. I mean, one time I was regressed by a psychic when I was fairly young. And I don't know what kind of test she did on me, but she said, "Oh, you're a soul that knows all the religions. There's nothing that's unknown there for you." And it is true that I took a literature class in college on India from a man who grew up in India and was, an Indian. And I had studied the Bhagavad Gita, and I just knew the whole thing. And he gave me a straight A and just says, all this stuff. It just came naturally to me. I think it's because of my prior life stuff, right?
Agreed.
So that's just so you understand where I'm coming from.
No, I love it. I mean, Crowley was one of the most influential human beings, I think, in modern history, but mostly through, rock and roll and music. And I mean, it persists to this day. When you look at Jay-Z and Beyonce and Do As Thou Wilt on the hoodies, and this whole philosophy, which is, it's Thelema, but Thelema is kind of synonymous in a lot of ways with Satanism. I like that you made the distinction that it's maybe not,
it's about self-determination,
right,
as far as I'm concerned. And
right.
You can go either negative or positive in that, from there. So it's not necessarily passing judgment. It's not advocating Satanism per se.
Right.
The book. I mean, if you read the Book of the Law, he also, had ET contact supposedly with this particular ET, which is probably a gray alien. So this is before anyone else would talk about it in the popular world, the mainstream. And so that seemed to also have influenced him. And whether it influenced him in a good way or bad way, I can't say. Okay. Because when I read that as a kid, I thought, well, this is a creepy kind of character. I totally believed in, otherworldly, other dimensions, other beings. I mean, all of that I just came in with. I could communicate. I could, I knew about ghosts. I had ghost experiences. I can relate some of those if you like. I mean, I also was fairly psychic and intuitive, and I knew things. That's a big thing about me. In fact, my mother, I don't know if I should even say this, but my mother used to call me Know-It-All Kerry since I was a little kid. I mean, really young, like 5 years old or something, because I would just spout off stuff and just say, and talk back to my parents. I got in tons of trouble for that. Then I started talking back to my teachers, got in trouble for that. So I wasn't.
I can picture this. You just,
my personality
how I grew up
hasn't changed at all, I have to say. You know how some people say they changed so much since they were young? I haven't. So for what it's worth.
I haven't either, and I've been accused of much the same. Oh,
Okay.
that's funny.
Cool.
Yeah. But you know, it's kind of interesting. You know, there's not very many people that would come out and say Crowley's not all bad. And it leads me to this thing that we always come up against. You know, we do a lot of amazing interviews with, you know, just tremendous well, I mean, the guests are tremendous, but it's like, is it a demon or is it an angel, or is it a demon or an alien? Is it this or that? And people are so hardwired into
Right.
certain perception that they're gonna close themselves off completely to any conclusion they might otherwise think themselves through, because of this. It's almost like rooting for a sports team.
Like either flat earth or round earth. If they hear it mentioned on one way or another,
Yeah.
they won't watch the rest of the interview if it's
Yeah.
brought up. And
Right.
we're just trying to figure it
When
out.
Joe asked me about flat earth, I said,
A
well,
while ago.
yeah, years ago, I said, well, it's both. It's round and it's flat. It's both.
Well, yeah, it's a question of perception.
Mhm.
I don't think I necessarily want to get in that discussion, but I have my explanation for why people have gotten into that. And I do think it's a psyop, by the way. But I also know that even Ashayana Dean would talk about, you know, the different dimensions, like as plates, you know, plates mounted on top of each other, you know, with this, it's kind of like, aren't those wedding cakes, or well, in England, you get,
Right.
you have tea and you get, each level has different sandwiches and this and that. So it's like that. The universe, I believe, is constructed something like that. The fourth dimension, which we are moving into and actually have already moved into, and more so, it's, you know, I use the word moving into, which is probably, you know, a completely misleading terminology, because of course, everything is already here, right? So
Yeah.
there's no moving that's necessary, but what we do is we say the veils are, you know, thinning, and that the fourth dimension is becoming more obvious to us humans, and that we are having our more and more of our superpowers revealed to us, and our abilities to do things like time travel and change dimensions and et cetera, et cetera. And I've always had a lot of natural understanding of that. So when I learned about it at a very young age, it didn't, like, I read this, I don't know if you know the Seth material, when I was like 12. I read it when I was 12. Okay. And when I read it, it was like, oh yeah, this sounds right. You know, like, this is very good. And, you know, so I studied about Jane Roberts and all of that. So yeah, I mean, I want to get back to the point you were making about people, you know, people with, because I didn't grow up in a, you know, Bible home. I went out and bought a Bible when I was around 12 and decided I needed to read it. So I did. And I liked it. I actually liked things about it, you know, but I never got programmed. I've already told this story in another show, so I hope it's not going to bore people. But when my mother decided we needed some kind of spirituality or religion, keeping in mind my father would not set foot in a church. So, and they were married in Stanford Chapel, for what it's worth. And my mother graduated from Stanford. So basically what happened was she took me around to churches when I was around 12. I don't know the exact age, but it's about that. And I was her oldest daughter. So she kind of, I don't know, she kind of relied on me, and we didn't have your normal mother-daughter relationship, as I don't know what that is, but I didn't have that kind of relationship with my parents that other people have.
I don't
that
either.
I see out there on movies and TV, and, you know, that people talk about. My father actually treated me as an equal, so I never had that thing where, oh, she's a woman and she has to behave a certain way and all this kind of, you know, I never was treated like that ever by my father. I was like his friend. And I actually would stop him from doing certain things. Like, he had a very, I don't know what you call it, animosity towards my brother, who became gay, of all things. And he couldn't handle that at all. And I would actually interfere when he wanted to like hit my brother or something and stop him from doing whatever he didn't think was right. And I would actually get in between them and stop him. So I'm just trying to demonstrate. I don't mean to get so personal here. I don't normally, but I think that it's important for people to understand that I never grew up with these programming things that other people have brought with them into their life. And therefore, you couldn't tell me, things like, I mean, I would hear things and listen, and I was an avid reader. I read tons of stuff. Like the bookmobile would come in summer and I would just get stacks of books. I don't know what the hell I was doing, to tell you the truth, but that's what I did. So nobody like taught me how to be a human. I just, did it myself. I figured out things, but I know that I wasn't like other kids in that way. So that being the case, now when I talk to people that are religious, okay, and I think Juan 07 is a perfect example because he's like a really, you know who Juan 07 is?
Very much so, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we've
we've interacted with him a few times. So
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, all right, cool.
Well, which 107 we're not sure, because I think there's more than one.
That's right. That's correct.
Thank you.
So what happens though is that he really hit that religious thing hard, and it he uses it to tell stories and all that stuff. In my own mind, I actually wonder if he actually believes this stuff as much as he talks about believing it, because it's just, I don't know. I think there's a disconnect when people are just so obsessed with the Bible and that story of Jesus and so on and so forth. I actually tend to go along with more the Ashiana Dean version, which there's several Christs. There was a sixth dimensional Christ, ninth dimensional Christ, and there might have been a higher level Christ. As far as I'm concerned, Christ isn't coming back. This silliness. Sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody, but I'm sorry. We are the second coming.
That's
okay.
Right.
He didn't fail at his job the first time. If you don't have Christ consciousness, that means that you just didn't get it. Okay. But the reality is that it's up to us now to be the Christ. Okay. So that's my philosophy.
Yeah,
so in answer to your question about demons and angels, and can call aliens whatever you want. I could care less. But I think that there's an accompanying picture like that a demon is bad and angels are good, when actually, witches and warlocks know for a fact that demons and angels are not necessarily good or bad. And there are good demons and bad angels, or they can behave badly. You know what I'm saying? So fat little babies flying around with wings is not my idea of an angel either.
Nor mine. Well, it's nature. Nature doesn't know from right and wrong. Nature recognizes balance, and I think you definitely understand the idea of balance. This idea that everything's going to be fixed. We're going to go through this process, and then evil will be banished, and it'll be light and love from here on out. That's not the nature of creation. That's not the nature of even God's intention. That's it seems that there's always the matter of maintaining balance, whether it's bacteria, mycelium, humanity, everything that exists in all of creation. It's all about balance, more than necessarily our conception of right and wrong.
Well, I believe it's a sensate universe, and that, or at least on the earth plane. And I think that everything is alive. Everything has a degree of consciousness, so that if you relate to reality that way, and even everything around you that way, whether it be a table or the computer, and I have to be very careful with electronics because I can affect them, and they'll freak out over me. And the same thing, like my headlights on my car will just used to go out all the time until I finally talked to my car about that whole issue.
Me too. My mother won't let me put Christmas lights on the tree anymore.
I don't think I've heard that.
Yeah, no, yeah.
No, really.
I
And
can drive down the street and all the lights will go out. Boom, boom,
yeah,
boom.
I have
Oh
done
my
that
God.
too. And the TSA scanners in the airports, I've turned them off. I broke them. I've broken other things too, but not by, I wasn't even trying to really. It's just that if I was uncomfortable or didn't like something, then it got messed up. So I have to be careful around electronics. And, it's funny, Miles Johnston was just on my show, and they tried to ban that interview. And one of the things he talked about, he's Irish and he's actually very funny. But he said that there's, and he's also, I have to say, an intel officer of some kind. But he said that Irish people have some kind of metagene that gives them a direct connection to computers and even possibly AI. I've never heard anyone say that about Irish people, but I've experienced that. Like one of my webmasters was Irish, and and obviously I have Irish and all of this kind of thing. So there is something to that. I don't know literally what that metagene is or anything like that, but I that makes sense to me.
Right.
It does make sense. I'll tell you, being in Ireland, we took a trip to Ireland not too long ago, and there's a lot of confusion energetically happening in Ireland.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it without going into too much.
Yeah, I don't think we need to get into the details.
We had an interesting time. Well,
Ireland's like kind of a weird vortex. So
yeah, Ireland's a fascinating place.
It really is.
Well,
Mark Atwood has a lot to say.
Yeah, we have a buddy.
Are one of you's Irish, right?
I'm part Irish.
Yeah, he's part Irish.
Okay.
Mostly Italian, but
all right,
Irish and some Welsh in there. So
well, on the topic of Ireland, or on what we've been talking about, some people have responded in the comments of our show about how the Bible could not have been manipulated. That's God's word. Could you go into a bit, please, to let the viewers know that the Bible that a lot of people read, that it has been manipulated? Because it really has.
It's known history that the Council of Nicaea, and may I say, this is a group of white men. Hello, does anyone notice that kind of thing going on? So in our history, so yes, in fact, there are a lot of things in the Bible that Christ, in my opinion, would hate. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. Okay. In fact, Christ was not really into the church, that whole idea of a church. So that was Paul, as I understand it, that was Paul's deal. The church is not what Christ would be interested in at all. So I think that you have to start there, and understand Christ consciousness, and, to love each other, and to love everything around you, and to some of those things, the truth shall set you free. I agree with that sentence, but I don't agree that someone followed Christ around with a tape recorder or writing down, a bunch of people with scribes writing down every word he said. And then it got into the Bible and they made it red, in the Bible, at least the ones I've seen. So I don't buy that. Okay. I buy that there are a lot of rewriting of the Bible, a lot of steering of the Bible. I believe that, as they say, religion is the opiate of the people, and it is there to actually control you much more than to give you any spiritual basis for your life whatsoever. You need to really read between the lines and do it intelligently. And then there's some just completely down and out lies and manipulation going on there too. So, what can I say?
There's 11 references to the Book of Enoch in the Old Testament, and yet there's no Book of Enoch in the Bible. Obviously, there's a lot of political advantages to editing the Bible. And I think that's entirely what has happened. Were you, how many books were you saying were originally part of the Bible?
Well, I've heard that, that 7-Eleven, the convenience store, I don't know if this is correct, but is the amount of books that may have been taken out, and then we're left with 66, and this is very specific, but 777 minus 66 is 7-Eleven. I don't know. I'm just saying, I think there's a lot of stuff that's left out of what we're supposed to be being taught, and that's the whole premise of what we're here for, is to talk about that stuff.
It would seem to me that the whole Jesus message really was pretty anti-religion. So
Totally.
clearly that would be pretty politically disadvantageous to issue that message. So I think that was eliminated early on.
Well, the codification of spirituality into religion is it's all about control. So controlling the masses, etc. I said this in another interview recently, but first of all, I get sick if I go to Vatican Square. So immediately I get ill, and I really can't spend hardly any time there at all. Now, a long, long time ago, I went by myself there and went on those tours that you go on just to educate myself about what, the Vatican was all about, having heard of it, of course, my whole life. And I have to say that, it's very much programming in my view. And this, I don't really like the popes. Okay. And certainly the Pope, Francis, is it, who was the Nazi that came over from South America.
Yeah.
And, now I do think that there were a few popes, one in particular, and I probably don't get his name right. He might be called John Paul, but he didn't have a very long reign and he died kind of quickly. But I think I liked him. I think that's the one, but I might have the name wrong. And it's been years.
And there might be a few Pope John Pauls. I mean, I think there was
right.
And
And
three that I
that's
know.
why I'm just saying, but no, this one was alive during my time. He came to New York City, but I think Malachi Martin is a really wonderful person who spent a lot of time at the Vatican, who wrote books about the Satanism in the Vatican and the influx of that into everything Vatican. And there's no doubt whatsoever that the Pope is reptilian and that he's run by the reptilians. In fact, there's a whole nest of reptilians under the Vatican, for those that don't know, in an underground base. And so is the Dark Pope, the other one, forget what you call him. Maybe you call him the Dark Pope, whatever. This, the Black Pope or whatever it's called. So, and he leads the P2 Lodge, in France. And I've interviewed Leo Zagami, and he was a Satanist, and he actually was possessed. He became possessed by whatever you want to call
Leo
that.
did. We interviewed Leo, and I don't think that came up. So thank you for clarifying that.
It was one of my favorite interviews.
He's amazing. He's
a fascinating, and he's written lots of books.
Yeah.
And when I interviewed him, I think I'm one of the first back then to interview him. Certainly, we interviewed him in person. We actually flew over there. He at the time was living in Norway, of all places, and we interviewed him in Norway. Left our car in the Milan airport, which was broken into. They didn't take any credit cards that were clearly there, and they were looking feverishly through that car. Apparently, we found out later, for this Cristoforo Barbato tape that was supposed to be part of the Vatican, library of stuff. That was a film, like a tape. I'm talking about back in the day, the videotapes of Planet X. And we had gone to interview Lucas Scantamburlo about Planet X, who lived in northern Italy at the time. And then we came down to Milan and, like I said, flew to Norway. So during that time, they broke into our car. And in Norway, I had a very weird ET experience with these little ETs that were in this hotel, camped out, basically, probably an underground base under the hotel. And I basically was playing hide and go seek with them all night long, and they were so stupid that I just had a very low opinion of them. These were actually quite small. They were even smaller than your normal small ones, right?
Like vril
There are
size?
lots of different sizes. What?
Like the size of a vril? Were you staying at a Hilton?
I don't remember the name of the hotel.
grill.
But I woke up early in the morning after having these dreams and basically, trying to fake out these aliens the whole night. And told Bill Ryan, who was my partner at the time, that we were leaving right then, the second he woke up. In fact, I probably woke him up, and we got the hell out of there. So just saying, that was just a little anecdote about Norway. But anyway, Norway is a very beautiful place. And one of my webmasters, Tommy Hansen, who was with me forever, and is still a good friend, is Norwegian. So I like the Norwegian people. So
It's a
don't get the
beautiful
wrong
country.
idea
I was
here.
there about
And it's
10 years
really
ago.
lovely, and it's actually kind of a fun place to go because the people are quite different. They're kind of like I don't know how to explain it, but they were cool. So
Their government has some issues. I understand their
yeah, and they have some very intense Illuminati lodges and stuff that run that place like a freaking Nazi concentration camp. But
they
aside
help
from
they help
that,
blow up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Apparently, they helped.
well, yeah, that's a whole nother story. But
So,
but
not the people, the government, just kind of like the United States.
Just to clarify.
yeah. So, but just saying that we interviewed Leo Zagami in Norway, of all places.
Wow.
And it was a face-to-face interview. And he was very cool in the sense that he told it like it was. He basically talked about the Illuminati and told his secrets that he knew as a member and growing up in that world. And he also said that, the Bible is their playbook. And if it doesn't happen, they're going to make it happen. So that's the way they live.
So was this before, because you said Leo Zagami was a former Satanist. So was this shortly thereafter he left, being a Satanist, or
yeah, he had some relationship thing going on at the time, and I think a child at the time, but he well, okay, the story is that actually sometime after that, not only did he get possessed, but he also was given a job which had something to do with why he did the interview in the first place, which was once in a while, Illuminati, the P2 Lodge and in various lodges are given a job to go infiltrate the light side, okay? And that they're supposed to learn that way, and then they come back to the dark. In his case, this is hypothetical, okay, because I don't know him now, right, and he won't talk to me. I tried to interview him. He told me he thinks I'm a CIA agent.
Oh, wow.
Which is absurd. If you know me, you know how completely absurd. I mean, the CIA basically hate me, but whatever. So he basically came over to the light side as part of his job. He told us that he was going to be doing that. Then he did that. And I think what happened is he kind of liked it on the light side, and he decided he wanted to stay over there. And he also had family reasons for wanting to stay on the light. So he moved to America after that. And I really lost touch with him. So I don't know the saga, that happened since then. But I have seen very brief, excerpts of him being interviewed around the place. And so that's kind of good. I know he's written some great books, and I actually bought one of them and, have read part of it. So, yeah, I mean, I like that he'll tell you the truth. He'll tell you a lot of truth. So,
yeah, that was one of our most favorite interviews.
Yeah, and Brad Olson, who we've interviewed a few times, is his publisher, and it's interesting. Well, maybe way down the road, maybe we can bridge the gap between Kerry and Leo. I'm not saying
wouldn't that be fun?
Well,
yeah.
Who knows? We never know where the hell this is going. So
whatever,
Wow.
I mean, it's his deal, whatever he wants to think.
Sure.
Well, on the topic of 107, Can you go into, because we've met him, we've actually talked about how look I got his book, you got two for, I don't know, it's like 20 or 30
Great
dollars.
book. Great book.
Great book. And I thought, Juan is going to be a straight shooter. I'm quoting a movie from, what is it, for Office Space, I think.
Yeah.
Straight shooter, upper management. I'm reading the book. He's talking about the Titanic, Paul McCartney, everything. And then he comes out, and then there's like, a lot of great information, a lot of disinformation, a lot of dangling carrot. And I was finally so fed up after me. He basically told us, because we're part of the Truth Tour. We were in Anaheim in fall of 2022, because now it's spring of 2023. And he's like, yeah, let people know that Trump's going to be arrested. And that was in the fall. And here it is. And now we're seeing this start to happen. And I'm like, I'm never going to fucking tell people what Juan says again. I don't want him on the show. I was just like, I've heard enough, because part of it is, though, is there is disinformation, and there is more than one Juan. And I'm learning a lot of this from listening to you. And so we're trying to understand, because I'm reading this book and going, this guy's going to be a great resource, straight to the point. But now we're seeing, different Juans and different information. So feel free to comment on that. And I know you were going to say,
well, I feel like Kerry got the same briefing that we did. Don't talk about aliens. Don't talk about certain things.
Don't talk about AI.
Talk about Trump getting arrested next Wednesday, which didn't happen. I mean, this was what, like
6-7 months ago.
Right. And of course we didn't do that, much like you didn't do that, but because we're
well, I've talked a great deal about Juan, and I've written about him, and I've also written to him, and I've also published my letters to him on occasion. And, I just gave him a lecture last night. I mean, so on a regular basis. Because,
wait, which one? Do you know which one
okay.
you're talking
well,
about?
Yes. Okay. And there's a whole drama behind that. So, I don't necessarily want to repeat the whole story, but I will say that, okay, so I was one of the journalists among a group of journalists. And first of all, I interviewed him in January, I think, and I hope I don't get my year wrong, but I think it was January of 2020, I interviewed him. Okay. During that interview, he invited me to come with those other journalists to this Friday night cocktail party, and then screenings over the weekend of Sound of Freedom, the child trafficking movie, which, by the way, is extremely tame, totally general, PG, whatever. And I can't believe he sat on it for this long, but don't get me started. So back to January. So January, I interviewed him. And after the interview, he told me he would never let me interview him again, because it was too dangerous, because I would get him to tell the truth. Too much truth, as he put it. So then in March was the actual event, and I went and was at the cocktail party, and he came and spoke. Now, which one was it?
Vegas, right?
Yes, in Las Vegas. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
And we all stayed in this country western hotel in Vegas that's at the end of the strip. It's called South Park or something weird like that. And not a very nice hotel, in my opinion. But don't, because I'm very particular about hotels. So he stayed in the Trump. Hello, wait. So he stayed in the Trump, and we stayed, us lesser ones stayed in this sort of dreadful place. So that's fine. I mean, it's livable. There's not horrible. And it does have a rodeo place somewhere there, which is kind of a redeeming quality, but nonetheless. So right away, he had told me, I guess to entice me there, that we would have weekend meetings. So I thought, wow, cool. So I said, of course I'd go, and I'd be there the whole weekend. And then we ended up having no meetings, except I pushed the point on the Saturday morning and said, where's the meeting? And he said, well, there is one going on right now. It was in this place called the Dragons, Hill or wherever. It's literally Dragons, it's a housing development, a very exclusive, expensive houses with lots of land. And it's called Dragons something. So he told me that, yeah, I could go, and I'd connected with a number of the journalists and quasi, whatever people that were invited. And so we all kind of jumped into my car and drove up there and basically walked in on a Republican meeting of just Republicans. And I'm talking old school Republicans. And they were in no way prepared for me or us.
I didn't know this was going to be such an entertaining interview. Please go ahead.
You're asking me these questions, and since I know
Sure.
you a lot and you've met him, it's much easier to talk to you about it. So,
Oh,
what
yeah.
happened was, of course, I wasn't going to talk and everything. And Juan came in and he addressed that crowd. I watched his speech, and this is, I believe, the real one, John F. Kennedy Jr. In his disguise, which I hate and is so
They both
horrible.
wear fat suits, and yeah,
They wear the exact same disguise, okay, but they're two
masks
different
and
guys.
anyway, go
So, and I've got all this on my website. I've got photos. I've gone into a lot of this, okay. And so what happened was, he tried to convince that crowd of Republicans that energy ran the world and that they should get into nuclear energy. And I was like, why are you trying to convince these people to get into old school energy when, because I'm all about the secret space program and alternative forms of energy and zero energy, you name it.
So he knows all about it. Yeah.
Yes, of course he does. He's an expert on this stuff. Yeah. So then he left. He was there for like a 20-minute speech and he left. Then we stayed behind, and the group of people, and it was quite a large gathering, started, talking and having their other speakers or whatever. And at a certain point, they were talking about certain things. And I basically, what happened was the mic was going around the room and it sort of sailed near me, and I didn't resist grabbing it. So then I said some things and basically freaked everyone out. I just...
I know what that's like.
Oh God, that's good.
And so me and my whole group got up from the table after I spoke, and with the reaction we were getting, and we just walked out. So that was my big old school Republican debut, so to speak.
No, I got to say, I watched, shout out to Dave from Patriot Underground. We've been watching the interview that you did with him from about a week and a half ago. And I'm taking notes and on these great topics. And I love that when you learn, and then you just throw all that shit out and you're like, okay, here we are actually with Kerry talking about all kinds of stuff. Because I will say that people should watch that amazing interview that you did.
Oh, it's a great interview
with Dave from Patriot Underground.
Thank you. Okay.
Connected. And he had great questions and he had great insight. And I was thinking that this might be part two. But this is a whole different ball game, which comes with people that, it's great to be.
Well, it's because you're in the know. Now, wait. So I just want to say, though, that prior to that weekend, I already knew that John F. Kennedy Jr. was alive. Okay. And I had done some research on that, so that by the time I interviewed him, if you ever listened to my interview that January, I actually said, do you want me to call you John? Do you want me to call you John? Do you want me to call you Juan? And he said, I prefer Juan. And so that was the first thing I said to him. We had been texting back and forth, of course, to set up the interview, though.
Sure.
So then what happened was, we were texting after I left that event, at the end of the event, and I was there. And at one point I was late to one of the screenings, and I went into the theater, and my friends were all sitting in a particular area, and Juan was sitting by himself on the side of, on one of the chairs. And you know how you go up the stairs in a theater. So I just went like that, just to like, I don't know, just say hi, but I tapped his shoulder.
Yeah.
And I realized that it felt like he had like straw under his where his shoulder would be.
Yeah.
And so that
yeah,
actually, and I already had met him in person at the cocktail party also. And when I went up to him, he acted really weird. And I just stood there and I was like, what? He's not gonna, they kept their conversation going, ignoring me, which, I don't like to be ignored. But
Of course not.
so I expected him to be more cordial towards me, but he wasn't. And also immediately, because I'm very psychic, I knew there was something wrong. So when I went home, I told my girlfriend there was something wrong with his face and I couldn't figure it out. Okay. I wasn't even into the bodysuit thing. I didn't even know about the bodysuit thing
At the time.
Eventually, I did investigate that whole thing. Sean David Morton is a good friend of mine, and he told me that he dressed up in one of those bodysuits, had a mask and the whole thing, and his family didn't even recognize him.
Wow.
So, and I have a contact, a intelligence agent contact, and I asked him about the whole, how convincing could this be, and blah blah blah. And he basically said, yeah, it was totally convincing and all that. So I had, I did research. Then what happened was, I was just texting back and forth, like cordially with him on the phone when something would be said or something, whatever. And then on April 3rd, the Schumann resonance went through the roof. And that night I had nonstop dreams about Juan and Trump the whole night. And in that dream sequence, which I kept coming awake and going back into, and that was one of the things that it's this dream thing that I have done before. It happened to me in Egypt one time, but it hadn't happened to me since then. And it's the most bizarre thing where I actually go into another reality. And I completely believe that's reality. So that when I woke up, I was like, no, this is not reality. I am not here. And I'm going back there, because it was very interesting to be hanging out with John Jr. and Trump, right? Well, in my dreams of John, a lot of it more of John Jr. than Trump, he told me exactly how he did his disguise, like everything about it. I didn't remember all the details, but I knew he told me everything. So I woke up at 9 o'clock that morning, and I thought, what do I do now? Do I tell him that I've had these dreams? I hope he's not going to think I'm a psycho or something. So, but then I thought, fuck it. If I don't tell him now, I probably never will. And that'll be really horrible, because this was an incredible night of dreams. And one of the dreams was that Trump was going to run in 2024, which ended up to be true. And I did not dream that he would run or win in 2020. So that's kind of interesting. So what happened was I texted him, and he answered me like he had his phone right in his hand. Immediately, he said, now you've got my attention. And I've saved all these texts, so, or most of them. And so, but he said, now you've got my attention. He said, this week, I think he said 2 or 3 other people had dreams about him, Juan being JFK Jr. That's what he said. He never denied it whatsoever. And he told me he actually wrote in quite extensive detail this other person's dream. Well, their dream was nothing like my dream, but their dream was of Juan and John in a car together in the Long Beach area, a convertible, as I remember, coming down a road. And that person was asking them questions. And every time that she would ask them a question, they would look at each other, and then one of them would answer. So she was getting that kind of a dream. Mine were way different than that, but whatever. So because of that, strangely for me, okay, I had constant dreams for weeks and then months, every other night, or in the beginning was very often. And now it's only, once every few months really that I have a dream, but I still have them. In fact, recently I had a dream, and the other thing is I text him and tell him. But what happened was, a year into texting him, and I also met with him at the Patriot Double Down. That's a whole nother story. And we don't have a lot of time for this, I'm sure, because, we're trying to keep this kind of concise. So I'm not going to go into that, because I did in other interviews. But I want to say that. So what happened was, around December of 2020, going into January, I think, of 2021 is when he cut off speaking to me at all on text.
Has it been that way ever since?
Yeah. So he will not text me back, but I constantly send him stuff. I send him all my interviews. I talk to him. I complain about everything he does. I compliment him sometimes, I tell him, all this stuff. So, like I said, I just did last night. And, so I just figure he told me at one point, okay, so then I met with him at the the Reckoning Festival in August of this last year, 2022, right? I met him in person there again. But I also, during the Patriot Double Down, I stayed in the Trump Hotel and I argued with the other one in the lobby in full view of everyone. I had friends there sitting at a table. I kept going up to his table when he later sat down, just kidding around with him and asking him crazy stuff and telling him to his face he wasn't Juan, that he wasn't John, and that, where's John? And there was a whole thing going on about that. I'm not going to go into detail because, I do try to protect his privacy to a degree, believe it or not. So, but I'm just telling you, I can tell you that I was super close to his face. We were having a big, deep discussion right in the Trump lobby. And I was staring because at that point I had decided after, the first time I'm meeting him at the cocktail party and that weekend, and then this was the Patriot Double Down, that I was going to figure out what the hell was going on with him. Right. And so I stared at this guy's face very close and he had blue eyes. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I could see that he was like nothing like Juan. Okay. Juan John. He was nothing like him in personality. He's like much more, what do you call it? So John, if one is hot, the other one's cold. Okay. So John Jr. is very passionate, hot. He's very, he uses all his drama to get his audience and all that. This guy is like very, sort of, objective, point blank,
functionary,
logical, very logical, totally different vibe, totally different.
That was
He wears the same weird outfit, right?
Yeah.
And then we got proof of this, that there's at least two Juans, and there may be more, from the hotel itself. Okay. I'm not going to get anybody in trouble over there, but I can tell you that we really drilled down in this story. So yeah, that's the story you wanted to know about Juan.
Well, I'll tell you, I had a very similar experience. I think we both did. The guy that gave us the briefing with all the disinformation had a completely different vibe from the guy that presented the evening before, I believe. So I'm right there with you on that. And I get really irritated about disinformation, and I've voiced that on the show.
There's plenty of it.
I've invited Juan to come on the show anytime, but I think it's important for me to say I would prefer, that we have the authentic Juan, because functionaries kind of boring.
And let me say this, okay? Now, I may be wrong about this, and it's not like he always tells the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I'm not saying that, but I do know that he actually, I'm talking about John Jr., that version of Juan, he has a code of ethics, and I believe he has made a vow to himself. First of all, if you ever have listened to him, and as much as I have, and occasionally he has been asked if he, if he is John Jr. or whatever, and he never answers the question. He gets silent. He does weird shit. And by the way, if you ever mention my name, he'll go completely silent and get very weird also. So don't do that. But anyway, he, I
love it. I love it.
But I have to say that he doesn't lie to people. Okay. So he will walk around the truth to get it out of it, but he will not lie to you directly. I believe, especially the people, okay, when he's doing broadcasts. And I think it's a code of honor that he has. And therefore, that is part of his style, that he, instead of answering the question, he'll tell you a biblical parable, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, he's like a gypsy pickpocket. He's so skilled with that shit. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's a good way to
No,
put
it
it.
really is.
He really is good.
Yeah,
at it.
and 20 minutes into his story, you forgot the question you asked him in the first place. So
That's
Yes.
I think
It's
that's part
brilliant.
of his point.
yeah, oh no, it's brilliant.
Yeah, but
I
sometimes
gotta
he
admire
will-
the guy.
he
Yeah.
will tell you the truth within the story, though.
Mhm.
So if you listen close enough, and occasionally, in fact, he just did it recently. I've just put it on my Telegram today. I was listening to this interview he did with Tom Numbers. There's two good interviews lately. One in particular, Tom Numbers, he revealed some truth, and with Lewis Herms. By the way, I got to know Lewis quite a bit because I've interviewed him a couple of times. I've met him. I spoke at the Truth Conference, and Lewis and I kind of have a similar point of view about a lot of things. So I can tell you that, what was my point? Just that, I don't know, that just to say that his style, Juan's style is a certain kind of style, but he has dropped some truth recently. Do you want me to tell you what they are? Because
But real quick,
he'll
that
take you
was-
10 years to tell you again. But
do you think
I'll
that
tell
was
you.
the real one with Lewis though? Because
He
Lewis
lately, yes, he lately said that there are 4 Bidens. Okay. And he also said he's talking a lot about the biscuit that the FBI went into Mar-a-Lago to get, and that Trump has memorized it and left the actual biscuit in NORAD.
Yeah.
And he also said, I have it written down, these things written down. I put them on my Telegram. So do you mind? I'll try to bring
do whatever
Okay.
you need.
Take
to.
your time. I think
you
Juan
guys can ask me a question meanwhile while I'm waiting for this to come up. I don't want to forget the things he said, because it was quite good what he said, these couple of things that he said recently.
I think Juan's suit guy and Biden's suit guy might be the same guy, because they're so believable. I mean, they really are.
No, because I mean, it's clear that Biden has these. I mean, there is no real Biden, whereas there is a real.
Well, the real Biden's dead.
I was kind of going
He
for the
is.
joke there, Kerry, but yeah.
Yeah, the real Biden's no more. Yeah, and the whole Hunter Biden laptop thing, like, what's your perspective on how the laptop got to the guy's shop and all? Like, what really happened there behind?
I have no idea, but he is a drug addict, so anything's possible.
With Hunter?
Yeah,
Oh yeah. Well, there's the Russian.
you know what I'm saying. But whether that was a mistake or a convenient mistake, or whether that was a call for help, because Juan actually, I think he knew Hunter in his younger days or something, because he seems to have quite a sympathy for Hunter. I mean, he doesn't agree with anything he does, but if you listen closely, he actually said that that unfortunately he grew up with this horrible father and in this circumstance, and that it more or less put him into this position where he had to be the bag man for all of the illegal stuff that the Biden mafia family does.
Well,
Kind of like W.
Well,
same
real
thing.
quick on that topic, I think of all the the actors and actresses and musicians and the whole being inverted thing. What if that's a topic we get into or not, but all the satanic inverted weird shit that they have to deal with. If you're inverted from a young age and given hormones and you have to live as the different sex and you remove your whatever, and then it's years later and you've been MK Ultra'd, like, they didn't choose that, and if they don't go along with it, then
They as souls, they definitely chose it. So
okay, that's a whole other
my
level. Thank you.
opinion, but the bottom line is that it's also the John McAfee stuff has never really come out, and that a lot of promises from Juan on that one. Now let me address the fact that he's not lying when he says something's going to happen and it doesn't. It just means that that the timeline has changed, that the dark side has done something to interfere,
Right.
like basically 9/11, an apartment building a block away from Ivanka's house. And the rumor at that time also, when they went after the McAfee stuff, is that Barron might have been kidnapped during that time. So we're talking really, this is not everyday stuff. This is stuff that interrupts any timeline or any prediction that anyone has. So you can't go around saying he's lying to you. He's not lying. It just didn't happen like he thought it would right then and there. But usually he always turns out to be right. He always turns out to be right. So
it just may take a little bit longer than.
yes.
It was right about the Trump arrest, wasn't he? It just took what, 7
and
months?
He knew way before. He said that before anyone did. I've heard other people give credit to other people, and they're wrong. He is the one who said that unequivocally. Now I'm trying to get on my Telegram because I want to tell you. See, also, just for those that are listening and don't know this already, my Telegram, I go on there and actually start ranting in text. Okay, so at any given day, if I read something or I come across something, and it could be from Juan or some other, video I've seen or whatever it is, or it's an article that I come across, I will start ranting. And, sometimes I go on for a while, but at least if you want to stay in touch with me and want to know what I'm seeing and what I'm coming across, and, you can get some very thought-provoking ranting from me on there.
Like it.
Okay, so I'm trying to, this thing is not loading, of course, go figure. Of course, I want to show you something, but
well, while you look for that, what is your, Gene Decode was a big part of my awakening, and I know you're going to be doing another show next week with Dave from Patriot Underground. Gene, what is your take on Gene? What's your experience been with Gene Decode?
Well, I think Gene is wonderful. I really do.
We love Gene.
I don't always think the information he's giving about the underground bases is like right on the money. I think he has to be really careful. So I think he may have to change certain things like locations or dates or whatever it happens to be. I mean, I understand he's trying to protect himself, his identity, and the identity of the people that are involved in these operations. He has told, a long time ago, he told people that he wouldn't do an interview with me, and he hasn't, because he thinks, just like Juan thinks, that I get people to break their security oaths, so he wouldn't go near me. But then what happened was Patriot Underground had this brilliant idea to get us on a show where we don't exactly talk to each other, except sort of cordially. But I don't ask him any questions, and he doesn't ask me any questions. So it's really all going through Patriot Underground. And it seems to work to keep Gene thinking that he's safe from my powers, whatever. I mean, these are whatever.
With regard to Gene and the statement that you made about Juan being off as far as the timeline, we had Andrew Bisagio on the show, who you may or may not be familiar with, but he
yes, in fact, I was one of the first people that even brought him to the public in some ways. Wonderful. Aside from what's his name? God. I'm drawing a blank on the person's name, but anyway, the Canadian lawyer, whatever his name is. So yes, Basiago is actually, we did a television pilot for a television show for True TV that was supposed to be the follow-up to Jesse Ventura Conspiracy Theory. And we filmed it all over the Southwest on location. We had a lot of my Camelot witnesses in it, and we were in it. And, it's actually very good. It's well done. And you can watch it on the About Us page on my website. If you scroll down, you'll see it embedded there. So what happened is they fired. Okay. So what happened was that Gordon Neville, who I have interviewed many times and became kind of like a friend, loosely speaking. Okay. So we would talk every once in a while and whatever. So what happened was he basically called me up while we were on location in Palm Springs with him and everybody, but he was like, you know, wherever he was at the time. And he said, I know you think I work for the CIA, and I'm going to tell you you're right. Because he always used to deny it all the time. So it was kind of ongoing joke between us. And he goes, and by the way, I have them on the line here and they want to talk to your producer. So I ran downstairs and gave the phone to my producer. We were staying in a hotel, and they had a conversation. They basically, through Gordon and through the CIA guy, whoever talked to him, offered him that we would go to series if they could run the show. And our producer was young and kind of, you know, full of himself, whatever you want to say that is, and, you know, principled, maybe you want to say that, and said no to them. And then he got fired. And he basically, I think, left the entertainment industry shortly after that. So there might have been some other things they did to him. Then they fired our producer, they fired the director, and they took our footage and they re-edited it and they put it together the way they wanted it. And then they put it on the shelf, and it never got seen for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden, one night, we got word from, because we had a lot of loyal fans out there, that it was listed in the TV guide that was going to be on that night. It was like a Friday night. So we quickly put that out to all our fans, and we also recorded it. And so what you see on my website is the recorded footage of the show that we basically decided it was our show, and we co-produced it basically, because a ton of it was all our witnesses. And then they also took all of my lines and they gave them to Bill, because they wanted Bill to be the big man like Jesse Ventura. And they didn't like the fact that I was, you know, who I was. So they sidelined me. So a lot of times you'll see, if you watch that show, you'll see me standing there silent. And it's really actually kind of funny if you know me, because
It was your words that Bill was saying.
Yeah, you being
Yes.
silent, that doesn't compute.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you being silent doesn't make a lot of sense.
no, you'll see me. And there's one frame where we're talking to David Wilcock, who was one of our witnesses back then. And David had just said to us, okay, so what happens? You don't know the history. I have a huge history with David, and, you know, interviewed him and brought him back into the sort of public eye when he was actually thinking of quitting. And he'll even tell you that. And so what happened was, we were on the set with David and they were filming us. And right prior to that scene, I had asked David if we could interview his famous whistleblower, because he started doing what we do after he met us. Okay. I guess he thought what we were doing was brilliant, and he decided he needed a piece of that action, because it's kind of hard to just get up on stage or wherever it is and spout off the top of your head endlessly. You run out of data, right? So he decided he could stay current, I think, by doing what we do. So he had a whistleblower of his own called Daniel. So I said, and I used to give him my whistleblowers to talk with, to get intel, right? I would connect him. So I had connected him with Henry Deacon and a bunch of other ones that were really top whistleblowers, right? And so I said to him, I'd like to interview Daniel. Can you arrange it? And he told me no. And I was so mad that he said that to me. And so what you'll see is there's a shot of me with David, and I open my mouth and I have my mouth open like, I can't fucking believe you're saying no to me, right? And so what they wrote into the script was that I was surprised by something David said when David got all this information from us.
Oh God.
So it's like, you know, that's TV for you. They lie and they do all kinds of, even reality TV, this totally staged. Okay. Just to say, in case you don't know that.
I often wondered about David, because I mean, in 2017, I listened to a lot of his material, and it stimulated about 1,000 hours of research. But I think he's kind of lumped in with the whole Corey Good kind of.
Well, that was a very unfortunate time in David's existence, but I don't want to go into all that, because you know, certain people are not whatever. So I've got this thing up here.
Oh,
I was going to
perfect.
tell you what I wrote that Juan said earlier today, because I'm like, I am so prolific on this channel, and I have about 100,000, depending. Right, we're down to 98,000. I don't know where these people go. They come and go, right? If I say
Oh,
something,
that's
like,
censoring. I don't think that's anything to do with. Yeah, I think.
or I'm being ghosted, or whatever they call that. So, so right here, I'm going to share my screen, okay? But you guys can look at it later, and people can actually read it later, because I don't want to take up your time by literally reading it. Because again, part of it is just me saying, okay, so he reveals that the Department of Defense had a vaccine prepared in 2013 before the release of COVID. Okay.
Right.
We're talking 2013. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
A vaccine already on the books.
7 years.
And he states that the planning was so extensive that nothing Trump would have done when he came into office would have done anything, that it was going to be released no matter what he did, and it was going to be released worldwide. And it specifically talks about an incident, which he's talked about before, in case you don't know, where they actually went in with helicopters and special forces into Wilshire Boulevard to the Guatemalan embassy where it was being released. And they actually, according to him, bagged it up and flew it out of the place, okay, to stop that release of COVID. And I think that might have happened prior to 2019. So just saying that these are some interesting intel drops. And then the other thing he said about the nuclear biscuit and Trump, and the fact that, then I start ranting about the fact that I think, in case you are watching him lately, you'll see that he is talking a lot right now about what he calls the nuclear biscuit. Okay. And the fact that that Biden arranged the whole thing from, his office, having the FBI basically do his bidding and go break into Trump's Mar-a-Lago. But what that tells you is that Trump is still president and commander in chief. Okay. And so when you look, this is how you have to listen to Juan. So you have to understand why is he telling you this? And why does he keep repeating it? What he's doing is he's basically now emphasizing the fact that Trump has the nuclear codes. And I also say in my rant over there that I had actually gone to Minden, Nevada to hear Trump speak in person. So I was at a rally before he stopped doing rallies, right? Whenever that was. And I heard him say, and this is amazing, I think, he basically did a whole explanation, a whole case of how the Clintons lost the codes, how Biden lost the codes and didn't have them, and how he had them. And he said this at a rally over, in public. So that was before the raid of Mar-a-Lago. Now you've got Juan emphasizing the fact that Trump has the codes, because what is happening is they're desperate to start a nuclear war with Ukraine, but they don't have any nukes. They can't do jack shit with that without the codes. And so, of course, they need them, and Trump has them. So what does that tell you? It tells you that Trump's still president. He never stopped being president, and he's also commander in chief. It's kind of like a roundabout way of getting to tell the public that, hey, hello, if you put two and two together, this is what's happening.
See, I interpreted that a little differently in that I don't, we hear the story about, I think it was during the Eisenhower era, the idea that Galactics came in and said, look, you're messing stuff up in other dimensions. You can't do this anymore. And they deactivated.
As far as the nukes, right?
The nukes, yeah. But
no, that's not what happened.
Not what happened. Okay,
Sorry.
well, illuminate the terrain for us, if you will.
Well, I mean, I'm just, because I've been around this stuff for so long,
Yeah.
I've heard completely different stories.
That's why we wanted
They
to
actually did was they made a deal with Eisenhower that basically Eisenhower did a deal with the Greys that they could abduct certain amount of people in the United States in exchange for, technology. Okay. An exchange. That's what really took place. He also had meetings with Pleiadians and a couple others. By the way, the very first meeting they ever had was with an octopus. You know that movie that was made of octopuses? I know this sounds insane, but this is actually
it doesn't anymore, actually.
No.
Sorry?
It doesn't sound insane anymore.
Oh, okay. So anyway, just explaining that, just so you know that you have no idea the amount of stuff that's gone on there. But be that as it may, the idea here is not that the aliens wanted us to stop having nukes and stuff. Of course, some did, but the bottom line is, actually, this is kind of interesting. I don't know if you know who Robert Salas is.
Mm-hmm.
He's a whistleblower, had to do with the Wyoming Minnow missiles. Okay, that missile installation. He worked there. He was guarding them. He slept overnight on the site and all that kind of stuff. And he was down in the bunker below it. And they had a whole UFO incursion coming there. Well, one of the things that came out a while later, he talks about, well, they turned them all off. Actually, there are a lot of grays out there who have actually gone into our sites and turned them on. Okay.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
It's completely, this is the story behind the story. So they are actually trying to create a war, getting us into a war. And by the way, Captain Mark Richards has told me numerous historical events that were involved with grays and not what we think they were at all. So that a lot of the things that are going on here on Earth, including this war we're in right now, has an ET component. And sometimes the ET component far overrides and overshadows the American issue, or the world issue, human issue. So, and that has to do with the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis and this ship that was blown up off the coast of Israel. I forget the name of it, and a lot of incidents. Okay. And in fact, the entire Vietnam War, it was all fought over the invasion of spider beings, which I've talked about before. I can get into that. It looks like I'm kind of blowing your minds here, so I want to slow down a little.
Just the spider beings part. That part I wasn't.
I actually put the word out and said, if there are any Vietnam vets who got their memories back, because they all get wiped, and they remember anything to do with this. And I got 3 people come to me. One of them wouldn't come on public, and one of them ended up going public. The other one was sort of back channel. So all I can tell you is that, yes, and I'll explain the whole thing.
Okay.
So if you go to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, you'll see there's a story. It's like a famous story about how that city disappeared overnight. That all the people, it's a very ornate, beautiful place, and it has a river running through it. And what happened was all the humans there disappeared overnight. This is back centuries ago. Like, I don't even remember the exact year. Okay. Then fast forward to Vietnam. What they had was so let me explain what happened to Angkor Wat. So this is what Mark Richards told me. And you got to understand that this is one of the best whistleblowers ever. He basically, I've interviewed him now for over a 5-year period of time, kind of like every 6 months. So I have 12 interviews with him, which I'm working into a book. But basically, he had nothing to lose by telling me what he told, because they considered that he's discredited, okay, because he is up on charges of being a mastermind of a murder that he didn't commit, which, by the way, was committed by 3 young men, one of who got off completely scot-free, and the other one, I think, did state's evidence and got off. And then there was just one other one that got stuck in prison with Mark. So what happens is, and Mark's trial was a whole, dog and pony show. So, and I all of this is on my website. You can investigate and do all your study. And then you also need to know that there's a guy, I don't think I'm going to say his name, but his initials are KM, I think. And years ago, he started attacking, and he was a British intel asset. I won't even call him an agent. I think he's an asset, but who had a pornographic store in Holland and a bunch of other fake businesses and all kind of weird stuff. He also became a radio DJ. You might know who I'm talking about, but he started threatening me, Mark's wife, and Mark nonstop. He even went to an old apartment building where I used to live. Thank God I didn't live there anymore. Stood outside there yelling my name with his camera going, filming that front door, thinking that I lived in that place. And he broadcast it and put it on the internet. I tried to get YouTube to take it down. Of course, they wouldn't do that, even though it's total invasion of privacy, etc. But anyway, that guy was run by British intelligence, okay, and still is. Hopefully he won't hear this interview. But anyway, so what happens is Angkor Wat, going back there. So this is what Mark says happened, is that these spider beings came through a portal, invaded the area, and the way spider beings get their victims is they mind control them. And so what they did is they mind controlled that whole city, basically, that had a river going through it, that it had no water. So people basically got dehydrated and then died of thirst, after which they ate them all. I know this is horrible. They're the size of VW bugs. Okay, sorry. And I can't stand spiders, so believe me, I hate telling this story. But nonetheless, this is what Mark told me. And then he said when Vietnam came around, they had started to open the portal and come through again. So the Vietnam War, although there may have been some things about communism and blah, blah, the bottom line was this stopping and closing the portal that was allowing these beings in again. And that's what the war was to cover for. Wow. This is what he says. It sounds the most like, why would you make this stuff up? It just sounds insane. Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, even because of that, it gets credibility. But when I put the word out for the Vietnam vets, there were, like I said, 3 that came forward for what it's worth. So I'm just
what did they say about that experience? Did they see these beings?
They think they did. They think they actually saw piles of bodies that they came in at night, and I don't know, whatever they did. But yeah, that's one of the stories that one of the guys told me.
Those things have been around for a very long time. I mean,
Miles Johnston, who, again, I told you he's an intel agent, he actually told me that they're still here and that there are some in, I hate saying this, but the Lake District of the UK in tunnels. So there are a few residual ones, but I guess they keep them under control. And I also had another whistleblower who told me that there was an incoming race of these things making a deal with China. And this was quite a few years ago. So I have to assume they might have arrived and made their deal, but they were considered the new kids on the block, for what it's worth. I don't know. I haven't gotten any follow-up on that. Right. But I keep wanting to call him the agent, which he is. But this intelligence guy is a secret witness who's never gone on video, never had an interview, only tells me back channel stuff. So.
Wow. Yeah, I think they go way, way, way back, like pre-Atlantean back.
Well, yeah. We've interviewed Stephen Kelly, and
he's great with the whole Getty thing.
Right, but he doesn't think that any of the kids have been rescued underground, and Gene Decode talks about a completely different perspective. So can you give us some insight onto what may be actually going on underground with rescue?
Well, no, I think Gene is right. I think they are rescuing kids. I've heard certain stories about it, and I actually had a certain kind of a dream that I'm not going to reveal. I can say that Stephen Kelly has his own perspective. You got to understand how this kind of stuff, a lot of it, the reason I have stuff that people don't is because I'm not partitioned. Okay. So a lot of people get into their own sort of thing, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, we
that's their
try to stay
area.
away from that too. So that's why we appreciate a broad perspective. So please go ahead.
Right. So that's all. I'm not saying for Stephen Kelly for his information. Now, the Getty, okay, that is a really, let's see, a deep nest, let's say. So he may be correct about that particular site. Okay. I don't know necessarily that the White Hats have even been able to broach that site.
Okay.
The
Getty specifically.
Yeah, it's because, and
Stephen Kelly.
there's,
Yeah.
there's two Gettys, the old one and the new one.
How far apart are they? I don't think I knew that.
A few miles, several miles, but one's on the coast. The old Getty is on the coast, and the new Getty is up on a hill in Brentwood. So it's, not that many miles, but you can imagine how deep and how big that base is.
Right.
It's got to be massive.
Okay.
So I don't know, but judging from where we're at right now, bringing us fast forward to this situation, is that this, I think, for the White Hats is a much longer thing than they maybe initially thought.
Agreed.
And maybe also, it's kind of like easy to propagandize your own stuff, right? Because you want to be hopeful, you want people on your side. It's not like outright lies so much as it is hopeful views of the future, right? But, and even, I have dreams, psychic dreams that come true and such. This is what I will say, because there's a lot of disinfo and bullshit out there, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, we and our viewers are trying to figure this out. So
I will say this. I have dreamed that the White Hats are going to be triumphant at a certain point, but is not going to stay that way. I've dreamed I attend a party. I've had lots of dreams of the future. Okay. And I have also dreamed that what they're doing now, they're still going to be involved in the future. In a sense, that's the good thing. Okay. So that means they're not going to ever back down from this fight, but it is going to quiet down. It's going to appear as though there's some degree of victory of humanity, but I think that is a ploy of the dark side. It's just my point of view, but I have to tell you, based on 18 years of getting deep into the rabbit hole, this is actually, I really have psychoanalyzed the Illuminati big time. Okay. I think I told Juan that the White Hat should hire me. He doesn't think he needs me. Okay. But I think he does. Okay. So that's just an ongoing argument with him.
I think that they could use you personally.
Okay. Because I don't come across anyone who has what I have. Okay. In terms of my depth of knowledge in these areas.
Right.
I listen to people. I try to find, and I'm not saying I know everything. Occasionally there'll be somebody talking about something that I don't maybe know much about, but I've had an incredible schooling, if you will, from all the whistleblowers. I mean, I've interviewed over 1,500 people, probably more. And I've also done a terrific amount of investigation, and those 1,500 would be public. I also have back channel experts telling me all kinds of stuff all the time, and intel coming in, even though they have really shut it down a lot because whistleblowers don't come out much. And even the ones that do are full of shit a lot of times. But I will say that I believe, I had this, for what it's worth. All right. You don't have to believe me, whatever. I really don't care. But just because you guys are so knowledgeable and, it's fun to talk to some people that really know stuff. I went to John Lear's birthday party and I wasn't supposed to go there, but we got invited and we were in Vegas first. I can't remember. I think we were going to interview him then, I've done several interviews with him. Well, he died, right? But prior to his death, he had a birthday party and George Knapp was there and he had Bob Lazar on the video. He didn't make it in person. And there was a bunch of people there. Okay. A very select group of people, very much in the know of everything. And on the way there, we're driving, you know, kind of, it's Vegas, but it's kind of the desert, right? At night. And we're trying to get to his house, and it was taking a while. And I kind of went into some kind of thing, whatever you want to call that. And I got like a download. And what they told me, it was right at the beginning, the very beginning of when it was starting to come out about the whole child trafficking pedophiles that there were going to be exposed.
What year was this roughly?
Well, it was his birthday. His daughters would know. But just generally speaking, let's just say, I don't know, 5 or 7 years ago. No, more than that, because it's way before Trump ran for office and all that stuff.
So 10 years ago-ish,
Maybe, yeah. So what happened was I got information, and I told it to my partner at the time. And I said, I just got this information coming to me, and they're telling me that although they're going to expose all of this, that the real culprits, the real deep level, high level Illuminati are going to get away, and they are going to go deeper, and they're going to disappear for a while. They're going to appear to, you know, be gone, and then they will resurface. That's going to be their tactic. Okay. So that the humans think they've won, but they haven't. I mean, these people are, I mean, you can hardly call them people, but they are so nefarious and so devious, and, you know, it's endless. So that's what I got. And it just came to me. I don't claim, I'm not claiming it wasn't my thought. It was actually sort of coming to me like that, you know, as a whole piece of information. So at the time, we were not deep into this at all. So it didn't, you know, I thought, why the hell am I learning this now? But I was kind of got in an altered state while we were driving there, and it was really dark at night. And that's what I got.
So part of, I think, this awakening, if you will, and you spoke a little bit about SGAnon in the interview with Dave from Patriot Underground, is that, you know, this isn't all, you know, as people say, rainbows and whatever, that we really need to be, this is to raise the consciousness, but stay conscious, stay aware, and constantly looking for things. So what is your, not that we're at the end of this at all, but what's your advice for humanity knowing this stuff as to what to look for and to keep an eye out for? You know, we see, you know, children being indoctrinated into being sexualized and transgendered and all this stuff, but where are we supposed to go with what we know, and how do we help educate each other to either quell this or stop this, or what can we do? What's some insight into that?
Well, okay. I've talked a little bit about this on various videos, but I'll kind of encapsulate it. So the bottom line, as far as I'm concerned, is the negative serves the positive. What that means is that the negative is not just useless, and you're never going to get, you know, everything. You can call it a golden age if you want, but the negative is going to be there. It's just going to be hidden. So what happens is, if it's a barometer, you know, like this kind of thing that goes like that, right now we are over here to the negative on Earth. Okay. And the idea of the fight we're fighting is to bring the needle back to the middle, so that there's a balance between light and dark on Earth again. What that does is it's free will sector, and so that people can decide to go to the dark in order to learn what they need to learn, and then to come back onto the light. And that is the quintessential whistleblower story as well. So as far as I'm concerned, this is not some big tragedy. We know, and I've talked about this before, and luckily William Tompkins came to the fore and wrote his books and actually did lots of interviews with Gaiam TV, number one, but with me for 3 hours. And then he was cut off from talking to me after that, because he'd been so forthcoming during that 3 hours. It was me and Michael Schratt, who's an aerospace expert. We're doing the interview, but of course it was mainly me. And in the interview, it's fascinating because, you know, at the end of the interview, he says he loves me and all this stuff. He just basically, you know, came forward with everything. And he was saying that our secret space program was built in cooperation with the Pleiadians. And those Pleiadians were beautiful Pleiadian women, mostly, who went to work for the men in the space program and basically helped run those men and run the whole program. Then a bunch of reptilians came in, Germans and reptilians, right? That whole influx. And then they actually sabotaged our space program, tried to slow us down, keep us here on Earth and all that stuff. And talks about, you know, the astronauts landing on the moon and countering a whole slew of reptilian craft, and the reptilians were standing next to their craft. It's a famous story that he tells. So this is the point. Reptilians and negative ETs are out there. The fight, or the war of worlds, has been going on for eons and eons. There are good ETs and bad ETs, just like there are good humans and bad humans. And this is an ongoing war of worlds that we on Earth are now. We've always been part of it. We've always gotten some blowback from it. It has a lot to do with our history, but now we're really deeply in it and we're becoming aware of it, which is even more impactful. So I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it as a good thing because we're becoming aware, and everyone, like, I can actually talk to people about this, you know, like you guys, but, you know, we cannot hide our heads in the sand. And eventually, what is for humans is an ascension pathway where we actually, through frequency and through this awareness, this growing awareness and learning, we will basically ascend out of the frequency that the reptilians and those kinds of negative ETs occupy, which generally speaking stops at 4 dimensions. Okay. Occasionally stuff goes up to 6, but we're going to go up to 6 and beyond. So it's just very important to understand it's not a dead end. It's an ongoing, you know, evolvement, if you will, or re-evolvement back to source.
Wow.
That-
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's that pendulum effect, right? You know, that I don't know, I can't remember if we talked about this before we recorded or not, but the idea that nature seeks balance. It's not necessarily about right and
Yes.
wrong. And
Well,
we need contrast, right? We need
Yes.
you can only know the light to the degree that you've experienced the dark, and vice versa. The idea to, if you eliminate one, you know, the terrain is obscured. You don't have an experience any longer. So I think to some degree that balance is entirely important.
well, the light illuminates the dark. And in the end of the day, it's a yin and yang universe, and probably multiverse, but definitely a system of polarities here on Earth.
And but you don't want the pendulum swinging, you know, way out here. You want it. This is peace.
You want to keep it, you know, this is a war of worlds, but, you know, it's like anything. You can't completely eliminate your enemy because they are still part of the multiverse, and they're, you know, one enemy will be replaced with another. And that's where AI comes in, because it turns out that the reptilians and Draco and a lot of these ETs that are negative are actually run behind the scenes by an AI. And
So
that AI,
how are they run? How
they were taken over, and that's actually what's happening to us. They're trying to take us over the same way. The AI
inoculations, etc.
Yes, we have alien AI. I mean, you guys wanted to start, maybe we should just do another show sometime soon about AI, because we were going to talk about AI. We didn't get to it. I think I've been on this show for quite a while. So I think we should come back to this.
We would love to have you back.
Okay. But I'm just saying that there's lots to say about AI. So I can't get it all out right this minute.
Right.
You know, I think that maybe I've given you and the listeners enough to deal with right now. And then we can set the stage and definitely come back and talk. I mean, I've got a slew of stuff about it.
I love it. I can't wait.
We would love, you know, we are at about an hour and a half, and then we can get into Donald Marshall stuff in the next time as well.
Yeah, and cloning and that. And by the way, Juan talked on those 2 interviews about cloning. So he's getting into stuff.
And those are both on your channel, correct?
No, those have nothing to do with me. Those are interviews, one with Tom Numbers guy that Juan
Okay.
does. And, like I said, Juan won't talk to me.
Right.
So
right.
Tom Numbers is recent. But I put both interviews on my Telegram.
Okay.
And talk about them.
Just so
and
folks
the other one is with Louis Herms, which was actually a few days ago.
Yep.
Which is a very good interview too, in which Louis asks good questions because he's a patriot who is basically a white hat and very up to speed on everything. So that's why Juan he still frustrates Louis, right?
Yeah.
Because Louis asks him questions and he just, not to save his life, will Juan answer directly, but he does it on purpose. He is trying to. You got to understand who Juan is. If you really understood who he is and how brilliant he is, and by the way, the fact that he has above Q clearance, and I have had this told to me, proved to me, okay, in various ways, and therefore he is basically a general or equal to or above generals. If you can wrap your mind around that. He's also vice president of the United States right now, but that's a whole nother matter.
But that depends on which Juan
I'm talking about John F. Kennedy.
Right, the real one. But
that's the real one.
But sometimes the non-real one will be on these interviews.
That's a question whether or not that ever happens. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not completely convinced that the other one ever does interviews. I think he shows up. He's at the places wherever Juan shows up in person. He wears the disguise. They play a little shifting cards or whatever you call that, and so on and so forth. But I'm not completely convinced the other guy, even though he's extremely intelligent and probably can carry on a conversation. I just don't think he can have the mannerisms and the vibe that the real one does. That I've listened very carefully. Now I could be wrong. There could be one or two appearances where they substituted the guy. I actually know also an experience, which sounds like you might have been at the conference. You guys went to Anaheim, right? The Truth Tour. Yeah. Well, Juan appeared there, but he also at the same time was in Texas.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
So I don't know which Juan you met with. And I don't know if he just came late or, you know what I'm saying? This kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that helps clarify.
I got that from a friend who was at that.
I'll tell you, there is so much left to talk about, and I can't wait till I get to do this again. I want to talk about Sophia.
Yes.
With regard to the AI,
sure.
Maybe get into CERN and some of these other topics. But thank you so much. I'll tell you, this is definitely one of my favorite interviews.
Yeah, and I know that you're going to put this up on your channel, but first for our viewers,
for you guys, if you'd like, whatever you want.
Oh, we'd be thrilled. So first, for our viewers, can you please tell people where to find you and all your information? And we'll do the same for your viewers. So please go right ahead.
Sure. Okay. So I'm at projectcamelotportal.com, projectcamelot.tv, or projectcamelot.org. And the reason I have 3 URLs is because we're banned in certain places like Germany. And so we had to create all these URLs to bypass these censors. Also, I put almost all my shows right away on Rumble. That's first line of defense. However, recently they banned the Miles Johnson interview. They wouldn't let me upload it. They finally did. It took like 2 or 3 days to upload it.
Yeah,
they were blocking me clearly, and they've been messing with me since then as well. So I'll go and it'll tell me that there's no such URLs as rumble.com. I mean, they do all kind of crazy shit. And so I used I have this old YouTube channel kicking around that I never use because every time I post anything, I get a strike. I already have a strike on it. I don't use it, but now I just put Miles's interview on there, and I don't know if they're deaf, dumb, and blind over there, or they just think that person who is not me and is not a person worth watching. So they haven't caught on yet. I'm sure they're going to catch on. It'll disappear. At some point I'll get a strike. I really could care less because I'm done with YouTube. So done.
Yeah.
But just saying. And I also have odyssey.com. I try to put all my stuff on there, but But understand, this is what happened. I got banned from YouTube overnight because of one sentence that Robert David Steele said in an interview that was not about COVID whatsoever. But they went in, and at midnight, and even psychically, I had put it on what you call unlisted. So technically it wasn't public, but they gave me a strike anyway and shut down my entire channel after like 17 years of being a YouTube director, a YouTube creator, and like one of their originals. Okay. And I had 70 million viewers on that channel and 361 or whatever it was subscribers. And I had over 1,000 videos.
Wow.
So when that happened, we had to become, I was making money on advertising to pay my bills. So since then I became subscriber based. It's the price of a latte once a month, $3 a month to join. And you support my work and the work of my webmaster when I have one. And that's it.
Wonderful.
Well, we appreciate that. And we totally relate to it. We just got to.
But everything I do is free. And there's a whole library of stuff that I did before this happened to me on YouTube. So I kept that library as free forever. And that is on Odyssey.com and on my website. So there's a whole about 1,000 videos that are completely free, always have been free, and always will be free. So, but it's everything I've done since then, which is since the year, I think it's 2020.
Okay.
That what happens is I do an interview, like this one will always be free because it's your interview, not mine. But if I do an interview, it will be out there for like a month or two free, and then it goes behind the paywall. That's how we do it to make it as easy as possible for people. So,
well, thank you for that. And we're Truth Stream with Joe and Scott primarily on Rumble. We do have a YouTube channel that currently has a couple of strikes. We have a BitChute channel. We are on TikTok. We're on Telegram. We're on Truth Social. So yeah, if you just type in Truth Stream with Joe and Scott, then you can find us anywhere. But primarily on Rumble, all of our interviews, we're going to have a whole slew of where to find us. But we really appreciate you. I can't even believe I never even thought a couple of years ago I'd even be having a conversation like this, with you guys, and especially thank you so much for being a warrior for the last nearly 2 decades on the subject matter, and for helping Scott as well have these conversations and feel a little more sane and talking to me about these subject matters. But you know what? I think when people realize, and I never really understood this earlier, how much evil there is in the world, then they can start understanding more about why all this stuff goes on, because it does sound crazy. It sounds insane, but when you realize what's really going on, it helps people understand more about our world. So thank you, Kerry, so much.
Yeah, thank you. Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. I've enjoyed it. And it's great to talk to people that really are up to speed.
Good,
Absolutely.
good. I'm looking forward to the next one. We can dig a little deeper.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Kerry.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.